that's something I learned during my time at Holtzbrinck, because and especially early stage where there's not much. It's not like private equity where you can look at spreadsheets and analyze cash flows and those kind of things, where it's more like you look at, if at all, you look at a PowerPoint presentation and you look in the eyes of a founder, and then you decide, do you get butterflies or not? And this is something apparently I was good at.
Welcome to Be Well. Today's guest is Konstantin Urban, or Tino, as many people know him. He founded Holtzbrinck Ventures, now HV Capital, and was part of early success stories like Zalando, Parship. In 2010, he actually switched sides and built his own company, Windeln.de, which went public 5 years later. And now Tino is an investor again, runs G Fund, an early stage VC fund investing in tomorrow's consumer brands. And it's lovely having you with us today, Konstantin. I already had the opportunity to talk to Sebastian, a founder from one of your portfolio companies, and he's also part of G Fund. We haven't had the chance to talk about G Fund in this podcast, but in today's episode, we're going to have the opportunity to talk about it a lot more. So for people who don't know you, Konstantin, would you like to maybe share a couple of words about your background and introduce yourself? It's great having you here.
I mean, you almost cited my CV. There's not much more to talk about my CV, no. But I mean, I have 2 kids, married, live outside of Munich. Actually, I grew up like 10 minutes by car from here. And it sort of had a boring CV, like many people that go into VC or found companies. Did my Abitur and then studied BBL and then did my MBA. And after that, I worked for consulting for 3 years. But then the opportunity came to work for, at the time, it was Holtzbrinck, the publishing group. And they were looking for someone to lead them into new media, as they call it at the time, which was the late 90s. And then we started to do sort of the first internet investments. At the beginning, it was mostly joint ventures together with American companies like Disney or with other German publishing houses like Axel Springer. And that then over time, so I wouldn't say I founded Holtzbrinck Ventures, but I was the first one on board, and we built it together with Martin Weber, who was my colleague, who then came 2 years later, and the two of us then, I would say, built what is now Holtzbrinck Ventures. And then, but sort of at the end of it, I felt like I would also, and the end for me, not the end of Holtzbrinck Ventures, because Holtzbrinck Ventures then became independent and really started to become really successful after I left. But because I really wanted to found my own company from scratch. And if you're, at the time I was like 40, 45, and if you want to found something, you better look for something that you still understand. And I thought like babies, because we had 2 young kids at the time, and e-commerce is something that I thought I understand, and then founded Windeln.de, which we took public 2015. After that, it became very rocky, but that's also something we can talk about. And then I was with BCG Digital Ventures as a partner, and came COVID, and I wanted to go back into real venture capital. Ideally launch my own fund. And this is probably the last thing I'm going to do, the last thing I'm going to build. And then I met Christoph Wahl, the dad of Sebastian Wahl, and we had 2 meetings. And then I thought the combination of 2 old guys, we were both 60 now, and the 2 young guys, both, well, Sebi turned 31 yesterday, or 2 days ago on Monday, but the 2 30-year-olds is a really interesting combination. And turned out to be true. To this day, it's really interesting to build the G Fund, and the first fund. So far, so good. It's going well. We are happy, and we want to launch the second fund, or start launching the second fund early next year. But the one thing that I'm almost most proud of is when I was a student, I invented the Kicker Manager Spiel, which is a fantasy football game, which 7 old men now, we still play to this day. And I can talk about that in a second, but when I was a student, I saw fantasy baseball in the US, and I thought this is something we should do in Germany. And I came back from a trip to the US, and I introduced it to my friends, and we came up with some rules and played it. And normally these things die after a few weeks, but we ended up playing the entire season. We always bought this magazine, because you have to know on Thursday who's playing, and on Monday you have to know like how they played and who gave which assist and which goal and which mark the kicker gave the player, and that all goes into the rankings. And then we approached the kicker, and they then bought, and we had nothing. But this was 1991, so this is pre-internet, so we didn't have anything but the idea, and we put we gave the idea to a notary, so that we made sure that we were the ones that, because it's only a copyright thing, we didn't have anything else, no patent or anything. Yeah, and then they bought it from us for. Now they for a long time they now own the entire rights, but we got some little money as students, and we still to this day 7 guys played for now more than 30 years, and there's also a 32-year ranking, I think now, and that's one of the biggest, I would say, next to my family, that's one of the biggest in Germany, would say, constante of my life, because we meet once a year physically, and the rest we yell at each other and ridicule each other on WhatsApp, and I'm. On every Friday, you have to hand in your team. Out of 20 players, you auctioned. You have to select 11, and then on Monday, I'm the one who always like does the calculation. And probably today AI could do it, but it's so the way is the goal, and to calculate all the stats is so much fun that I still do it to this day. And whatever job I had, it doesn't matter. It used to be Monday, now with Kicker Digital, it's Sunday evening. I start calculating the rankings. And this year, unfortunately, I'm really bad. But yeah, don't want to sort of don't make the entire podcast about the kicker manager spiel.
No, it's great. I missed out on this one. I mean, apparently it seems to have been one of those trigger moments that led you to entrepreneurship, I assume, or what? Because you were a consultant in your early days. You had a business background. I can relate. I also have a business background. A lot of consultants around me. And then you went to Holtzbrinck Ventures afterwards. But before that, you already started off with this kicker manager game. So was that already retrospectively the moment where you got more into entrepreneurship, or what was that moment that brought you also to Holtzbrinck and to the startup scene?
At least for me, I was never that confident in to know what I'm good at. So I wasn't like one of those guys that are 25, they come out of WHU and they immediately start building companies, because I just didn't know if this is something I'm good at. So it took, for me at least, I mean, I was always the one organizing things. I remember that whenever we were in the neighborhood, we had a tournament for table tennis, and I'm the one that came up with the idea, and I'm organizing the entire table tennis tournament. So things like that, it was always up to me. So if I saw an opportunity, even if it was something like that, I was the one sort of getting the things going. So this for sure, but I never knew if I could build companies. And then it then took the Holtzbrinck Group, where you, before that I didn't get in touch with entrepreneurship really. I mean, you didn't really meet founders, so you didn't know what kind of business models to build, and that was that I learned that I have that I'm somehow good at evaluating business ideas. That's something I learned during my time at Holtzbrinck, because and especially early stage where there's not much, it's not like private equity where you can look at spreadsheets and analyze cash flows and those kind of things, where it's more like you look at, if at all, you look at a PowerPoint presentation and you look in the eyes of a founder, and then you decide, do you get butterflies or not? And this is something apparently I was good at. So it needed, for me at least, it needed that kind of confidence to then go out and start my own company like Windeln. I mean, Holtzbrinck Ventures, yes, we built Holtzbrinck Ventures, and it was very much entrepreneurial because we had a lot of freedom that the Holtzbrinck family gave us, even in rocky times. And that's the benefits of being a family business like Holtzbrinck, because they don't shut you down if times get tough. And in times in 2000, when the crash happened, 2001, they were really bad, rocky times. But we were still able to invest in very often the best companies like Parship, which we founded, or Bol.com, which we bought from Bertelsmann, which is now like the powerhouse in the Benelux with, I think, 6 billion in revenues. And we bought it for 5 million euros at the time. This was 2003. So very often the best investments you make in a crisis. Also, that was very entrepreneurial, but still, for me, it took this knowledge that I know that I can sense a good business model. And once I knew that this is something I could do, because I saw others getting immersed into spreadsheets, and I said, you don't even have to calculate this. This is not going to work, or other way around. This is going to work. You don't have to you don't have to look at a spreadsheet for hours. That helped me then sort of not coming up with the idea for Vindel, that was diapers.com existed in the US, but liking the business and saying, okay, this is something that we could also do in Germany.
So that gave you enough confidence to
Yeah.
start off and go on that journey. Interesting. So you worked at Holtzbrinck and then you moved or switched sides to windeln.com, windeln.de. You started your own venture after a couple of years at Holtzbrinck. Could you maybe bring us along briefly? What was the founding story like for windeln.de? What did you guys also do? I think a lot of people in the audience may not know windeln.de that well because it's a bit of from another time. And maybe tell us how it was. I mean, you were already more settled and more established. You were not the young WHU entrepreneur that you described before. You were more the experienced person who has seen tons of ventures before as an investor, switching sides and then starting off windeln.de. How was the process like starting it off and building it? I know it's difficult to answer the entire question probably to answer that or give a summary how it was, how all those years were in a short answer, but maybe bring us along how that was.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a true story. I was thinking about sort of leaving Holtzbrinck and I want to go into this, but there were some reasons why I thought it's a good time to leave now. And then I was walking in Sylt where we spent the holiday with my wife, and I really we were talking about ideas, and I thought like e-commerce and babies and organic products. That's something that any of those, and I didn't think in combination necessarily, but just any of those is sort of interesting things. And then I came home from this walk and I opened the laptop and there was the message Axel Partners invests in diapers.com, and I thought like, wow, this is like a sign, because it's e-commerce, it's babies, and they're selling a lot of organic baby food on the website. I looked at the website and I said like, and the way they presented it, which is now probably normal, but at the time it was pretty interesting. And I said like, wow, that's it. I have to do it. And then I was looking for a co-founder because I'm good at some things, like, I don't know, in this case, I would say finding the overall model, talking to suppliers, how to position the company, online marketing, that kind of stuff. I think fundraising, those are the things I could do, but I just don't know how to build an ERP or introduce an ERP system, how to build the logistics, run the IT department, all of that. I had no idea. Finances, some of it I had no idea, some of it I didn't like to do. And then I met through my best man, I met Alex Brandt, who was the other founder, and we met at a Starbucks close to the Hauptbahnhof for the first time. And he's exactly the opposite. So of me, he can cover all those things. He's one of the smartest person I've ever met, and he can cover all those things. And it was just a really good combination. And he was, at the time, he was selling big, I don't know how you say in English, Telefonanlagen, telephone equipment at Siemens, and that came to an end because I think they have already sold it to a PE player, and he was about to leave, and he co-founded Want2Snap before, like in the 1999 2000 in those times. So he wanted to go back into founding a company, and it was perfect. And then we started basically working on Windel.
Amazing. And I mean, afterwards, I mean, you sort of went through that dream trajectory of a startup. You IPO'd later on, in a sense, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
In a sense, that was sort of the thing you would expect as a VC investor, the trajectory that a startup should sort of follow. How did that feel? I mean, IPOing, that's something that a lot of people they never ever have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
How does it feel now? So afterwards, I mean, how did the story go on?
Yeah. I mean, it was really, except for the fact that we were never profitable, but otherwise it was a perfect story, a picture perfect development. I mean, we were sales were increasing like crazy. I mean, I think we always beat the budget up to that point. And as you know, there are only very few startups that ever reach the budget, and we mostly beat it on top line. We were very lucky, I have to say, because we founded the company in 2010, and in 2011 we saw Chinese names popping up on our platform, and they were all buying German baby formula, baby milk, mostly. I mean, they also bought some other things, but it was mainly the baby milk. And we said like, this is this is interesting, because where are they coming from? Why do they only buy those few products? And they were always shipping to a few addresses in Germany. The biggest one was in Karlsruhe. And we said, let's look at this, because at the prices that we have and at the prices for baby products, consumables are very competitive because of Rossmann and DM. So we had very low margin on the products. And we said, if they only buy those products, and the idea of Windel, like the idea of diapers.com, was that you cross-sell. You sell diapers and baby food, and then you cross-sell into other products that have higher margins. But with those customers, there was no cross-selling, because they were mainly buying baby milk and some glasses and those kind of things. So we then said, okay, I mean, if we understood that these people in Karlsruhe, as opposed in Cologne, there were, as I said, there were a few, maybe 5 to 10 bigger, we call them freight forwarders. They were getting the customer from China. They were advertising China. They came to their homepage. They explained them how to navigate on Windel, which at the time was completely German, and how to put the products into the shopping basket and then enter their address in Karlsruhe, and they shipped it to China. And we said, okay, this is interesting. And it was and the reason was that in 2008, there was a scandal in China where maybe a few, I don't know how many, but it was a few babies died from tainted, or poisoned Chinese baby milk. So they wanted to buy the baby milk in 4 countries. It was New Zealand, Australia, Germany, and Holland. These were the main countries where they wanted to buy the baby milk, because they very much believed, and rightfully so, of course, because of the strict food laws, that baby milk would be the best and the best for their baby. So they didn't trust the local baby milk. So we said, okay, I mean, if the urge is that, and I don't know if you remember this, but there were the Rossmann DMs were empty, the shelves were empty, because they organized whole students, Chinese students, going to the stores, buying whatever they could, and then sending it to China. At the time, there were even trucks in Holland. There were even trucks stolen, like trucks with baby milk stolen. Because it was almost like cocaine in a way, or like some drugs, because it was that valuable. So we said, okay, we cannot do it with these kind of prices. We have to raise the prices. So we doubled prices, and nothing happened. I mean, nothing happened negatively. I mean, we had the same amount of sales. We had super profit. I mean, we had, of course, higher sales because we increased prices, but the same amount of orders. And suddenly this became a very, very profitable business, because you hardly did any marketing. You had very high shopping baskets. You had margins were, I think we had like 30-40% margin, which was at those shopping baskets really good. Before that, our margins were like 5 to 10%. And then we rode the wave, and then we really managed the business. We ended up delivering directly to China. We set up bonded warehouses in the free trade zones, because you cannot sell this milk officially in China, because it didn't adhere, sounds crazy, but it didn't adhere to the Chinese food regulation laws. So you couldn't just take the milk and sell it in the supermarket in China. So, but there were free trade zones that were regarded as non-Chinese territory, just from a customs perspective. And these trade zones, you can store the products and then deliver them to the Chinese customers overnight. So we did that. We had a Chinese website. We were on Alibaba. So we then managed the Chinese business, and that made up half of the revenues at the end. I think peaked at about 100 million in sales, the Chinese business, and very profitable. And that allowed us then to show better numbers and also do the IPO. But that also became the problem after the IPO, but we can go into that in a second. So no, for us, it was great, because we could show the numbers. In e-commerce, after fundraising is before fundraising. So we did about, I would say we did at least one fundraise a year. Then, and the good thing is, I have to say, is even if it didn't turn out after the IPO well, all of the early investors, including the early VCs, made money, and the business angels made really good money, especially if they did a secondary before the IPO. They made really good money. But you shouldn't have bought the stock. Now you ask me about the IPO. I mean, it was amazing, and I'm not here saying that I didn't enjoy it. I mean, you go from hedge fund to hedge fund in New York by car, and the good thing is that what I didn't know before, like that you get the capital calls immediately after the meeting. So you have the meeting, you come down, you step into the car, takes you to the next office, and they immediately tell you how much if they sign the IPO and how much they want to invest. And they never expect to get the full allocation. So if they say 10 million, they actually mean 2, 3, maximum 4 million. But before you realize, you're like, wow, 10, wow, next 5. And it's just a great feeling, I have to say. I mean, it was definitely it was definitely one of the sort of the heights of my career, and a lot of fun to do the IPO. Life after the IPO is not really that, and in terms of pressure, it's not really that different, because if you have a board that is like we had a board. In our board, there were not just the VC sitting in the board. This was before the IPO, but we also had everyone in the board was always also the founder of the VC company. So there was a lot of testosterone in the room, and you didn't really, it didn't really make sense to have a discussion on strategy, anything, because you had like 5 guys and 6 opinions. So the pressure was always there. It was there before the IPO, and after the IPO, it's almost different, because you don't really feel the single investor that bought shares. You don't really, see them. So you still have a board, but it's almost like it's different, because you have very often people in the board that are not necessarily the investors. So I wouldn't say the pressure is different. What is different is that everything you do after the IPO is in the public. So there's nothing you can hide. So let's say you want to close. We had a flash sale business which we then closed because it didn't make any money and we had to focus. And as a private company would have closed that, no one cared. Would have told the investors, and that's it. But when you do an IPO, you have to give an ad hoc Meldung, and you have to tell it to the market, and journalists are writing about it, and that also the information you give in the company. So you couldn't. Before that, you could just tell your employees or your leadership team. You could tell them everything. But after the IPO, you have to be very careful what you tell them and what is not yet communicated to the market, and so on. It's just a different life. So that's just something that we have to. One has to recognize when doing the IPO.
Amazing. Konstantin, thanks for sharing that. I think we have now a good idea what your background is like. I mean, you have an extended experience as an investor, but also as an operator, and also also operating during times with, let's say, with great tailwinds, right? You just described it, how Wind.de sort of scaled. Maybe looking back as an operator, and you're still talking to tons of founders now, as an investor, what learnings, what were the biggest learnings, and what would you have maybe done differently now, looking back retrospectively? Is anything that comes up during your entrepreneurial journey?
Maybe the second question first. Would I have done anything differently? I mean, there are always decisions nothing where I would say I regret it to the point that my life became miserable, or if I had only done that, my life would be completely different. No, because would have been the same wife, the same family, the same parents, the same house. I don't like that much change. So like I talked about the kicker manager tree, which we play since the early 90s, and I'm still married. That it wouldn't have changed, and I would have done. And it turned out the way it turned out. It turned out very well. So I'm very fortunate with everything that succeeded. Of course, there are things that, I mean, just to give you one idea, when I left Holtzbrinck, we all because there was sort of a carry. It was not really a carry, but it was sort of a carry program that we had based on the success of the investments, and then we all got the team, especially Martin and I, but the entire team got money. And the team that stayed reinvested it into the fund, and I kept it because I thought, wow, this is a lot of money for someone who's normally in an employer-employee position. And I thought, I'm not running the Holtzbrinck Ventures anymore. I don't feel comfortable with giving and not having the money to myself and doing things with it. But I should have, not that I shouldn't have left, but I should have left money in the fund, because of Zalando, the fund returned 11 times, I think, something like that. And so, yeah, there are decisions like that where you think like you should have done them differently. Maybe Alex and I should have, after the IPO, should have more quickly handed over Windeln to people that are or managers that are operationally stronger than we were, because Alex is very much a super highly intelligent consultant type, and I was more the investor. Now Alex is also investing. So yes, but at the end of the day, do I really regret that? Do I have sleepless nights over it? No, for sure not. And it turned out well. Turned out well either way. But there are small things here and there where you say, hey, you could have done them differently. Same with investments. I mean, you make mistakes and you make investments that are stupid, for sure. But I can say that on a greater scheme, most of the things like building Holtzbrinck Ventures, doing the kicker managers before, building Windeln, or now building the G Fund, it all overall became at least, yeah, it became a success. Even you can say Windeln, and then after the IPO didn't do well anymore because the Chinese business just became much more competitive, and so the margins were gone. But I would still say overall things that I did overall turned out quite well.
Were there any lessons? Because now you're talking to a lot of founders. Is there also lessons that you also give to founders?
You're right. That was the first question. It's more on the spot. Like, for instance, that I give an advice. It's not so much, okay, overall, this is the big advice in my life, and if you do that, you're gonna succeed or not succeed or whatever. If you don't do that, no, it's more like on a certain situations where you can give advice. For instance, if you're a founder, the way I see it, you have to, even if you have a very good board and you have a very good network of people, I mean, at the end, you have to decide what's right for the company, and then you have to do it regardless of what others say. And very often there is, and I'm not saying you should be arrogant. Of course, you should listen. If I remember, like in the Windel times when there were discussions at the end, Alex and I, and luckily we were most of the times, especially on the big things like doing the China business, we always agreed. And you just have to do what's best for you and not follow sort of, if you disagree with the board, you know what's best for the company normally, unless I mean, if you're always wrong, then you're just a bad founder. But let's say you're a good founder and you love what you do, then don't listen too much to the board, because boards or investors don't run the business. They don't necessarily know all the details. So that's definitely an advice I can give. You have to follow sort of what you think is right, and even if it creates conflicts, then do it. But again, I'm not saying be arrogant. I mean, if someone is constantly doing his own thing and failing, then you should think twice why that is. But then it's probably not a person you should invest in. But normally, I would say do whatever you think is right for the company. That's very often I get into the situation where this is an advice I give to them. I mean, this is just a learning that I had, and this is very broadly speaking. But when people think about whether they should found the company, leave their job, or not do it, my sense is if you're a founder, you don't really think that way. You don't think like, okay, these are I mean, there are people I met that create a spreadsheet with do's and don'ts and what are the reasons to now leave the job. And I understand that it's super difficult, especially if you're a family, if you work for BCG and you make, I don't know, $500,000 a year, and now you have to decide whether to go down to 60,000 euros a year. I mean, that's a big decision. Don't get me wrong, I'm not debating that. But if you are in this state of mind, at the end, most people don't end up founding companies. So I think, and I come to the advice in a second. So I think so that's just something. If there's something in your stomach where you think like, I have to do it, then founders typically just do it. And the advice I can give is that most of the times something good comes when you're smart, and when you have a smart team, when you have a good idea. Even if you have to pivot, even if you maybe fail with the first attempt, then to do it the second time. Usually, in my experience, something good comes out of that, even if it's not what you originally intended to do. And that's a very broad advice I can give. So don't be afraid of sort of crossing the waters or starting to swim, because again, if most people my experience is most people that left their job and did something, and of course, especially if it was successful, but if they did it, they're quite happy they did it, and they didn't look back and say, oh, I made so much money and now I cannot I cannot, I don't know, pay for this and that for at least for a certain number of years. Most of them, they were quite happy that they did what they did, because, and I know a lot of people that never left their job, and then they think like, why did I never leave the job? Yeah, I made good money, I'm happy, it's all good, but I never really did what I wanted to do and never fulfilled sort of my dream. So that, I think, is worse than people that left and failed.
Amazing. Konstantin, could you introduce us maybe also to what you're doing now at G Fund and bring us along? When did it start? What's
Yeah.
sort of your core hypothesis? I know that you are a lot into consumer brands. I talked to Sebastian, one of your portfolio companies. Tell us a bit more about G Fund, and maybe tell us maybe even how you differentiate yourself maybe in front of founders that you want to invest in, because there's tons of VCs out there. Maybe good founders even have oftentimes the choice. They can choose who to partner up with. Maybe share with us your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was at BCG Digital Ventures. As it was I would say it was an interesting good 2 years. BCG is an amazing company, but I then felt like and I knew this because I was like working for Gemini Consulting when I started my career. So I'm not really a consultant. It became more and more like a consultant job and less like a building job. So I said I would like to leave, and I wanted to go back into venture capital, ideally launch my own fund. And then through my neighbor who rented an apartment from Christoph Wahl, he said, "Hey, you guys should talk to each other because I think you have a similar idea." And then I met Christoph, the dad of Sebastian Wahl, and to be honest, at the beginning, I thought like, if it's just the two gray hairs doing this, I don't think it makes any sense, because then I don't think founders will it resonates the story with investors or founders. But then he said he's going to introduce me to his team. Sebastian Wahl and Carl Philipp von Fulheim, they stepped into the room when we had the first meeting, and that combination, I found it incredibly interesting, that you have two sort of experienced, let's not call it old, but experienced guys, and two young founders as partners. Basically, in the first meeting, I said, "Let's do it. I'm in," because like I am, and like many founders are, it's very much a gut feeling thing. And then, like I said before, you don't think that much in pros and cons. You just do it. And yeah, that was I think July 21, and then we started fundraising in terms of the and then maybe to end that story, but we couldn't to this day we cannot go fundraising with institutionals because we don't tick all the boxes. I mean, Sebi and Phil are still doing 100% MyBacks. So for many investors or the IFE or KfW or whoever, they wouldn't do it because they said, "Hey, wait a minute, two of your partners are still doing 100% of different another company." So we knew we had to use our own money and ask friends if they give us money for that. And that actually, I think we had the first closing then in March 22, maybe it was April, 5 million. And then we originally said 7.5, but if there's more, we go higher. And then we ended up raising 10 million. And now you ask about consumer. Yes, it is consumer. Why? Because that's at least all I know. And MyBix is a consumer company. I mean, Christoph, I would say also ProSieben is consumer, but he worked for Siemens in the past, so he also has some engineering knowledge. But mostly we are all consumers, consumer investor. We know consumer. We don't know AI and those topics. So that was the main reason. Now I would say it's a benefit because there are not that many consumer investors, but I believe there's still great consumer models, and we see them all the time. So I really like our positioning, and so far so good. I mean, we're really happy with the results so far. I mean, you only know after once you sold the companies what the outcome is, but we have a few really good, not just a few, I would say a third up to almost a half of the portfolio is really good companies that can be sold for 100 million plus. So yeah, we're working now because we now invested about 70% of the fund. So we're going to do maybe another 4 to 5 new investments out of that fund. And we want to raise the next fund next year, which will also be a small fund, a little bit higher, maybe 20 million, 25 million. I think we can talk to some family offices because we've shown that the model works. The four of us work together very well. Sebi and Phil can do it next to MyBix. MyBix is super successful despite them doing the G Fund, because many people maybe thought, can you do both? But it works. And yeah, so far so good.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting also that you have maybe family offices as your LPs and not institutional
Not
investors?
yet, not yet. I have to
Not
say. I
yet.
mean, we have some high net individuals. Maybe the one or two of them also have a family office, but not yet. But for the next fund, I would think that we will ask and hopefully convince, especially if it's a family office that's in the CPG business, or the wealth comes from a CPG business. I don't know, food companies or cosmetics or that kind of stuff. That they find it really interesting what we're doing, and we can raise some money for the fund. But also we put up another 2 million for the next fund, the four of us.
Yeah, but family office, from what I hear or from what I notice, is they're professionalizing a lot also in the US. You're having this huge wealth transfer, and I assume maybe you have more flexibility with family offices in comparison to maybe institutional
Yeah. I mean,
investors. Maybe
definitely,
they
I
more
should be.
entrepreneurial, and
Yeah.
from their background, it's interesting.
Yeah, it should be because, should be with the situation that Sebi and Phil are still running MyBags, and we see it as a big benefit because they really know how to build a consumer company, because they're doing it right now. What it means in terms of influencer marketing, for instance, what how to best look for your supplier or your producer, things like that. That most B2C or consumer companies struggle with. They've done it and they can consult, and very often founders can relate to them. I mean, they respect us, Christoph and me, because we've experienced, we've built a bunch of companies and so on, but they really like the knowledge that the guys have generated through MyBags, and that helps us also getting into good deals.
Amazing. Konstantin, one more question about, let's say, the consumer space. I started off about the business of health and wellness. That was initially my podcast. And you're seeing this huge shift there from treatment oriented to prevention, and health is becoming a lifestyle. I know you have a couple of portfolio companies that actually reflect that in a sense. I mean, MyBags, I think Body and Soul, I think is the company, or
No,
how do
New
you call
Soul.
it?
You
New
mean
Soul,
the
exactly. New
massage
Soul.
studio? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they sort of reflect that. So I'll be wondering more broadly, since you are in the consumer space as a whole, what shifts are you seeing? Are you also looking to the US a lot? What are sort of major shifts where you feel like, hey, maybe there's big opportunities now coming up in the consumer space? Because I think in the recent years, I mean, we had the tech movement, right? I mean, social media, social networks changing, disrupting the way we consume, also media. You've experienced it yourself with Holtzbrinck. Also then the e-commerce wave. What next waves are you particularly excited about? Is there any big shifts you're seeing or looking at in the consumer space?
I'm not that sort of fond of talking about waves, because mostly if you talk about a wave, you've either missed it or it has already been going on and is established. And in general, I don't think so much in waves, because if you're just following a wave, I think you might end up with bad investments. Like today, everybody is following the AI wave, and there's going to be a few really successful companies, but then there's going to be tons of companies that are overvalued and that just don't have a business model. No, I mean, I would say, many of the ideas that we invest in could have been invested in 20 years ago. If you take NewSoul as a massage chain, could have been done 20 years ago. The same with certain food and drinks. Yes, there's innovation in food when it comes to plant-based, which we shied away so far from because we thought it was really overvalued, and nothing against, I don't eat much meat anymore myself, but I'm just saying it really takes longer than expected for this to become a really viable company, or it's really highly valued because everybody's chasing it. So, but there is for sure, there's innovation in food. I mean, or in those longevity products, they are innovative, but some of the models could have been done 20 years ago. And still to this day, many of the trends still start in the US. I mean, if you look at NewSoul, there are 2 or 3 big massage chains. Massage Envy, I think, is one of them, that are in the US, and then they come over to Germany. Or same with fiber drinks, or that also. There's Olipop in the US, and then you have XOXO that we invested in Europe. So that's still the same. I think what has changed, or what makes this model today, and many of it is the same as and it doesn't really change. You still have to pick great teams. I mean, for us, it's always the 4 T's, like the total addressable market, TAM, team, traction, and the fourth one that we came up with is terms. And if you have those 4 T's, you still base your decision, at least we do, base our decision on those 4 T's if they are met. And that hasn't really changed in venture capital. That's why someone like me who's 60 now can still do it, and hopefully successfully. So that hasn't changed. What has changed is that through innovation and in technology, many of these models are just easier to do. I mean, if I remember when we did Vindel, we had to we took Magento as an open source platform, and we then had to program Magento in a way that we could use it for Vindel.de as a shop system. Today, with Shopify, it's so much easier. So the same goes for logistics. So I would say, with influencers, you can now really become really big in a rather short amount of time if you choose the right influencers. The question then is it sustainable or not? But so many things have become in a way easier, but because it's easier, more people do it, and then it's still very hard to do because you have to be the one that makes it and the others don't. But that has changed, I would say. So it's easier and costs less money to start off and build a company. That's also why you have in drinks or food where we are, or cosmetics, you have a lot of startups coming up. Many of them get stuck at a few 100,000 or maybe at a few million revenues, and only a few really make it into a double-digit or even triple-digit numbers. But that, I would say, is a different change. Many things have not changed.
Amazing. Konstantin, I'm looking at the time. We're coming to an end. Maybe final question to you. First of all, thank you very much for taking the time. Really exciting. If a younger founder comes up at you guys now, what advice would you give him? Maybe independently, if you were to invest or not. If there's someone wanting to build something, create something, what kind of advice would you give him or her on their journey? And feel free to share any closing thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, what I very often, because I have like 5, 6, 7 calls a day with founders, because I'm very curious. I don't mind, and that's me. And others work much more efficiently. They say, okay, they read through a page and say, it's not worth sort of having a call. And for me, it's very much like the interaction with the founder gives me then a feeling of whether we should progress and we should maybe invest in this company much more than reading through a deck. But everybody is different. Because of that, what I very often see is that what I very often say is that 99.9% of the companies are founded without VC money, and there's still many of them great companies. So if you you have to really think hard whether you want to take on VC, whether you have a VC investable model that the VCs like, which means the next 5 to 7 years you have to be, at least potentially, the company has to be worth more than 100 million. And many times I see sort of what the founder wants to do, the energy, the business model, maybe sometimes even in the plan, they have like in year 5 million revenues with 1 million in profit. I say, this is great, but it's not a VC model. So that's something I think you should really think about before you end up approaching VCs, because if you're don't want to, or the model doesn't give you that you can build a company that's scaling with all the disadvantages of scaling, I mean, hiring tons of people, at some point having to sell the company, have other people sort of, not making decisions for you, but at least having something to say in the company. All of the disadvantages of taking VC money, having to fundraise because you want to build something big and it's negative and you have to fundraise every year. I mean, there are many negatives of taking on VC money. It's not all positive, but that's something you have to think about before approaching VCs. And if it's not, there are many other ways. I mean, you can take money from friends. You can have a few business angels that love maybe what you do, but they're not sort of so much looking for the 100 million plus company. Or maybe if you talk to Holtzbrinck Ventures, they want to see the billion plus company. So, or you go take a bank loan like many people do. So there are other ways of financing it, and that's an advice I would give to people, apart from the advice I gave before, like do your own thing.
Amazing, Konstantin. Thank you very much. And I totally agree. I mean, here in St. Gallen, everybody wants to raise money from VCs, but you totally neglect that most part of the biggest share of companies actually finance in other ways. And there's a particular use case for VCs, and that's fine. That's okay. And it's great, but it's a particular use case. Yeah. Thank you very much, Konstantin, again, and hope to talk to you soon. And all the best on your journey with G Fund. And all the best.
Thanks. Great. And thanks, Toby.
All the best on your game, on your kicker game, obviously.
Yeah, this year I'm miserable, but hopefully next year I'm going to be better again.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye.